takes the win.
In the 1980s, Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels formed one of the greatest tag teams of the WWF's golden era, the Rockers.
We're coming at you.
With their high-flying moves and glam rock style, they became heartthrobs and wrestling superstars.
An arena of 15 to 20,000 screaming people. You don't even get that kind of high from drugs.
They've got that charisma that people love.
And the outfits and the hair and the smile.
After a shocking betrayal, only Shawn would ascend to the dizzying heights of fame that Marty had always craved.
Shawn Michaels, ladies and gentlemen!
Marty just let him walk all over him and just steal away his life.
Driven by an insatiable desire to reclaim his former success, Marty spirals down a destructive path of self-sabotage.
I get in a lot of trouble for my outside ring antics.
He takes everything to the extreme.
It's all about getting that reaction. The problem is you get hooked onto that.
Sometimes Marty's just his own worst enemy.
Burdened with health issues, Marty ignites a storm of controversy that threatens to consume his legacy, bringing him face to face with a secret that has haunted him for over 50 years.
He suggested he committed murder.
I was only trying to beat his ass. I wasn't trying to kill him.
I mean, he said a lot of crazy things, so we can only hope that there's no truth to any of it.
Trying to decipher fact from fiction is part of the game, too.
Wait, so did this happen?
I mean, it could have.
How you doing, brother? See you, man. Damn, how many cameras we got? 48 today.
I am MJ in the house, otherwise known as Marty Jannetty, one of the Rockers from back in the day.
Jannetty going all the way up, falls away.
This morning was rough. Like instant nerve. I can touch it right now. Right there's the worst point. Man, I can't wait till it heals, all the way so we can cut it open and put the joint back in.
He's a very charismatic, very charming individual. My name is Al Snow, former WWE superstar.
What does everybody want?
I've been a professional wrestler for going on 41 years, and at one time I was Marty Jannetty's partner in the New Rockers. And on that run, that was where Marty hurt his ankle. Really severely rolled it.
And Marty Jannetty collapsing into the rope.
Over the years, just got progressively worse and worse.
Yeah.
I've known Marty Jannetty since really high school is where we played football together and just were in the same class. I'm Lee McCluskey. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, do mostly foot and ankle work. Marty was he was a fantastic athlete, first of all, wrestling, of course.
In high school, he had a lot of interaction with my brothers playing ball and so forth. I'm George McCluskey, and I'm a shoulder and elbow surgeon in Columbus, Georgia. Most people have one problem in one shoulder or one problem in one foot or ankle, but he's got about 6 or 7 things.
MJ's up in the house.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what kind of pain would you say Marty is under right now?
12. On a good day.
Your body can only take so many slams, and I took quite a few. The ankles were bound to go, and we're working on those now. I had joint replacement in the right ankle, reconstructive on the left. Both shoulders are kind of torn up.
I remember him as being a very aggressive football player. Probably took sports more seriously than he did school. A little on the wild side.
I remember we were in chemistry lab, we were doing some experiments, and he said, hey, whatever you guys do now, do not put the blue chemicals in with the orange chemicals. And he didn't say why. And I thought, well, I would like to know why. Well, I took the 2 chemicals and mixed them together, and wham! One girl, she got blown back a few feet. The window that was behind me blew out, and I got stuff on me from the explosion. I was all over the school. Everybody's like, man, Jannetty blew up the lab. Did you hear about Jannetty blew up the lab? I don't think anybody else ever tried to mix the blue and orange.
You can't believe 99% of what Marty's, talking about. My name is Karen Walker, and I've known Marty for upwards of 40 years. He comes up with some of the strangest things, when Marty just walks up and talks to you, it's probably all a big story that he's making up as he goes along.
Actually, I was 13 and 12. I'd come over and the hookers would give me freebies because they thought it was cute. Donald Trump was coming towards me smiling. How you doing, Marty? You always got a pretty girl under your arms. I got talked into going to a sex addiction clinic, and they ended up dating my counselor.
He puts on a show for every single person he comes in contact to. So if you don't know him intimately, you don't know the gentle side, the kind side, the side that gets his feelings hurt.
Growing up, my mom and dad had a lot of issues with each other, and we struggled a lot. My dad would never let my mom beat on me. She would always have to wait till he went to work. So I would hide it from him so that they wouldn't get in a fight.
It was a tough upbringing. I mean, he's got some bad stories. My name is Mean Mike Moran, and I wrestled for WCW as one half of the Disorderly Conduct, and I also wrestled for 20-plus years as one half of the Texas Hangman. I met Marty in 1984. It was both our first territories, our first opportunities. Here we are 39 years later, still friends. Marty's mom was very abusive. His dad he loved to death, but his dad wasn't always there. I think that honestly athletics got him out of there. I mean, he was a good athlete, thankfully. And he punched his ticket and got to see the world and get the hell out of Columbus.
Determined to channel his natural athleticism into a pro wrestling career, Marty picks up the trade from veteran Jerry Oates before making his debut in 1983 in Mid-South.
A great maneuver by Marty Oates.
After jumping to Central States Wrestling in Kansas City, Marty's invited to mentor another young wrestler.
So I'm looking for him in the dressing room. I don't know who I'm looking for. I went up to this one guy because he looked shy and quiet, kind of standoffish. He was sort of nerdy, he had just blue jeans pulled up, up under his damn chest with a big belt buckle. Short hair, I felt comfortable go ask him. Well, I'm Shawn Michaels, and I'm thinking I'm supposed to hang out with him and show him around. Well, it's gonna take some work. From there, it was probably 2 weeks later, they said, you guys get together for a tag match. We went out there, and it was like magic. We were thinking. When he tapped me, he goes, did you feel something there? Yeah, that's different.
The Midnight Rockers!
Those guys were incredible. My name is Pat Tanaka. I've wrestled for many decades, and I guess people would know me best because I've wrestled the Rockers for many, many years.
Look out!
Marty and Shawn would run out. All you heard was just loud, high-pitched screams of girls going crazy.
Marty just seemed like he was out there having fun and just doing what he knew how to do. I am Bruce the Barber Beefcake, WWE Hall of Famer.
Welcome to the barbershop, ladies and gentlemen.
And I am Missy Beefcake, also known as the Delish. Marty had this thing where you just, no matter where he was in the ring, you couldn't take your eyes off of him. He'd go here or there, and he just, made you want to look and, maybe even like undress him with your eyes and wonder like what else was going on in that, little outfit he was wearing.
I mean, I was in heaven having all these girls around for several states.
I got into like middle school and I got a crush on Kerry Von Erich, and I went to see Kerry Von Erich one night and Marty was there and I saw him and I was like, oh my God, that's a Greek god. I'm gonna go home and throw rocks at my boyfriend. Yeah, and he was looking at me the same way. So we ended up getting together that night, and I'm his forever wifey, by the way.
Every time I went to St. Louis, I would see her. We hit it off and
like a girlfriend.
Yeah, well, for St. Louis. No.
From 15 feet above us.
Marty and Shawn have a stellar run in the AWA, culminating in a violent match that gets the attention of Vince McMahon. Dropping midnight from their name, the Rockers are signed to the WWF.
And I think this is well known through the wrestling world what happened our first day in there.
It was common for all the wrestlers to go out, party, you know, rumble around, but to the extent that Marty and Shawn would go, it was ridiculous.
We had great times. I mean, we had great times, but that's the only way I can say it without getting myself in trouble.
To celebrate their first night in the company, Marty and Shawn joined their new colleagues at a bar, but their notorious reputation for partying precedes them.
Jimmy Jack Funk comes up. Hey, I heard you guys are partiers, huh? Y'all supposed to be some big partiers. He goes, yeah, let me see you do this. And he takes a glass. He bit the glass. And Shawn's like, well, I can't do that, but I can do this. He took a wine glass, breaks it over his head.
And then they ended up throwing some shot glasses, I believe, over the bar at the Mirror.
They would tear things up. They would fight. They would bleed everywhere. I mean, just like they were in a wrestling ring. Throw each other around and stuff. Just get so messed up.
And that's why they were booted out, because they were just too wild.
If we just got one day and out on this one day and done for WWE, now what do we do?
After only 1 week in the WWF, Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels are fired for their wild and out-of-control antics.
And, I mean, what kind of luck, that GAT luck that I talk about? I've not explained GAT yet, I'm going to bring it up with me as many times as I can, because it's a factor that exists.
MJ's up in this house. We are gathered here today in the Holy Spirit of GAT. Just stands for God's amusement toy. When God gets a little bored with his natural disasters, where's Jannetty? And I'll be just strutting down the street, minding my own business, and all of a sudden, he throws a couple bolts of lightning on my, and he just sits there and giggles.
GAT, back at GAT again. GAT, because he can't accept responsibility, so it's got to be somebody's fault, so it must be God who's always turning the tables on him. And it's like, no, it's you.
I do believe Marty has had some bad luck, no doubt about it. But I also believe, and I've told Marty this, that a lot of the decisions you've made have caused the problems you have, and you need to stop blaming GAT.
His worst quality is Marty's own worst enemy.
Gone from the WWF, Marty and Shawn sign with a much smaller promotion, Continental Wrestling.
You know, in our short career, we beat them all.
Where they struggle to make ends meet. But after a year of impressing the crowds, they once again attract the attention of Vince McMahon, leading to a second chance with the company.
Well, if you got talent, you get many chances in any sport. They just kept moving up and up and up on the card. Women loved them. The guys wanted to be them. I mean, the Rockers were truly on their way.
We backed down from nobody, and the future has a lot to hold for the Rockers.
We are the masters of motion, and whether it be for business or pleasure, we have all the right moves.
During the Survivor Series, Lord Alfred Hayes.
The girls that were chasing the guys around the 80s and the 90s were, models and stuff.
Strippers.
We always party together. I mean, we used to have 20, 30 girls down at the pool. I was getting tired, and I said, Marty, I'm gonna lay down for a minute. So I lay down, I closed my eyes, and all of a sudden, he has his pistol in his hand, he just starts going bam, 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 bam. Shooting at him, with everything. I jumped off, I thought he had shot me. He was trying to wake me up. He didn't want me to go to sleep. Jesus Christ, I had a heart attack, man. When he had done that, he shot his car, put a hole in his bedroom, through the glass windows, and he got mad at me. You wouldn't have laid down, I wouldn't have had to done that. Yeah, Marty was crazy, man. We had so much fun.
When Marty and Shawn were really hitting it out of the park, they'd go to the hotel, they'd take a girl to the room, and there were girls lined up in the hallway waiting to go and take their turn at bat.
Like, we were on the road 300 days a year. We partied 290 of them. You know? And Sean and I, we were like brothers. We would room together. We would rent a car together. We'd go eat together. We'd go to the gym together. You know, a lot of women we did together. And at one point, you couldn't have been a closer couple of guys in wrestling.
As their popularity soars, Marty and Sean reach the pinnacle of their careers as a tag team. But on December 11th, 1990, a tragic incident threatens to derail their momentum.
Chuck Austin is his name. I had to show him there's this move I do for the finish, and the rocker dropper.
Yeah, look at this, here we go!
You know, I was stepping through it. He goes, oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've done it before. Well, yeah, I know exactly what went wrong. But right before, I was going off the second rope and come down, grab him by the back of the head and drive down like a bulldog sort of type of thing. Well, he took that decent, and the crowd popped. It looked good. So when I got him up in for the rocker dropper, he was all excited, wanted to make sure he got that same pop. But see, he stood all the way up and dove down.
He dove straight into the ring and broke his neck.
I go to roll him over. I stepped over him, I saw his legs crossed. And I saw him, he was laying there and he picked his arms up and like wiggle his fingers. And I tagged Sean, I said, I think he might be hurt, man. And Sean did great. He dove off the top. He did not touch him at all. And he covered for the pin. And he was still laying there, he hasn't moved, and so we got out the ring. So by the time I got in the back, everybody's gathered around the monitors looking, but he has not moved his legs, they're still crossed. He's not moved from the spot. I took him in the back and got him on a helicopter. And I'm watching all that. And just thinking, man, I caused that.
His job was to lose, but he lost more than he bargained for.
And Chuck says he expressed reservations about having to fall to the mat without using his hands to break his fall.
I questioned him several times, and he told me he was a professional and he would protect me. When I hit the mat, I knew my neck was broken.
I find out 6 months later, they're suing us for $10 million. The jury, they know what they saw on the TV, you know, because they had the TV monitor and they showed them, and they reacted on that. I did too, but oh, God. I mean, if they don't see it done right, it looks sickening to see.
There's a story that Dean Malenko came into the court.
Yeah, Dean come in, they told the jury, well, now you're going to see the move. Brought the mat in, did the rocker dropper there. The jury just sat there like, just looking, but it was just no reaction, none. And for wrestlers, that's the worst thing. You either want a yay or a boo. You don't want just nothing. It was 7 days worth of trial. We're done. They got the judgment. And it was probably 20 minutes. When they come down and say, we're ready. You know, it's hard to get 2 people to agree. Get 12 people, and you're ready in 20 minutes.
After a very brief deliberation, the jury returns with a verdict.
We find WWE 90% negligent. We find Chuck Austin 5%, Marty Jannetty 5% negligent. We find for Chuck Austin $24 million. I jumped up, and I was going to say, they were suing for 10. You know, my lawyer said, sit down, we'll appeal. We appealed. They called me and said they're willing to make a settlement for $10 million. You mean I got paid 5% on that? I think they had said they would just take it out of my royalty checks. I just didn't get as much pay as I was supposed to get for a while. The judge dismissed Sean and says, you're out of it. There's not no evidence against you. That's the luck of Sean. Sean, I've said this 1,000,000 times, and everybody who knows him will agree. He can step in shit and come out smelling like a rose.
I'm not a Sean fan at all, not even this much. He was egotistical. He was, the heartbreak kid kind of attitude. Well, that's his real attitude. That wasn't a show.
I mean, he was always a little cocky and arrogant, but, that's my brother. He's good to me. Then he started getting edgy towards me.
He would get aggravated when Marty'd overdo something. But on Sean's behalf, he didn't have quite as bad of a habit as Marty did.
I couldn't list the number of drugs Marty's probably done. I know cocaine, crack, somas, halcyons.
I saw him take a lot of halcyon, a heavy-duty tranquilizer. And he was laying on the floor with the pills spilt everywhere. I had to call Sean and tell Sean, what do I do? Do I call an ambulance? Do I call a cop? What do I do? And he's like, don't call nobody. Him and Jimmy Snuka, they just bust through the door and grabbed him and got him in the shower and stuff. And I cleaned the room, got the pills, and, you know, I was just somewhere else, you know. Oh my God, you know, he almost died.
I think maybe it was that Sean thought that Marty was going to screw up really bad because some of the shit that he did was, you know, crazy.
Like most partners do, because I'm in a tag team, Marty and Sean started butting heads a little bit and escalated to where they actually had a physical fight in a hotel.
Marty came in drunk, bumping all over, cussing Sean. And then here comes Sean and runs across the room and hits Marty, knocks him out a window. Luckily, we were down low, and he hit the bushes and crawled back through the window, got up in Sean's face and said, think you can do it again? Marty gets up and walks out the door. Sean walks out behind him. Next thing you know, I look out there, and Marty's got Sean on the ground. He's got his knees on his arms, and he's choking him. And he's already purple.
Marty just said he just remembers looking down and seeing his jeans were all bloody, and it wasn't his blood.
Should have never happened, but it did. And, you know, Sean had to miss a few days on the road from it.
And I think that was a catalyst to their end of their partnership, because you know what? If you get your ass kicked by your partner, it's kind of hard to go back to normal.
We met with Vince, and Vince is like, trying to find a way to split you guys up and take you into singles. I said, Sean, I need to talk about that first. Sean's like, I'm okay with it. Right there. I mean, like, wow, man. I said, well, where are we going to go with this? And, you know, Vince was saying, well, I see Sean being a superstar, and I just don't quite see that in you right now, Marty.
Could that have crushed him, or what?
Vince just saw something more in Sean, and I think that probably Sean was in Vince's ear or ass more than Marty was.
I hate to say it, use this expression, but kissing ass.
Yeah, I said, what are we doing me? Because, see, I figured, okay, you use me to get him over, then shit can me, I ain't going to do it. But if you're keeping me aboard, you know, of course I'll do it.
Yes, although there has been a great deal of speculation as of late that maybe there's a little trouble there between the Rockers. What do you know about it? Any rumors? Have you heard anything?
They were planting the seeds in matches prior where Marty and Sean had a little dust-up.
There was speculation among
And Sean would always be the one that was initiating or getting angrier, more frustrated.
Of course, the magazines were running with the story, how we were jealous of each other, who had prettier girls.
The rumors about them are true. They don't get along at all.
They had the barbershop, which was Bruce the Barber Beefcake's kind of like talk show.
Let's welcome them right now. They're the Rockers.
And that was the pinnacle of the turn.
You've been having some problems, but I want to get you out here on the barbershop so we can talk about this thing and get it all straight once and for all.
Before that day, I had no idea that that was going to happen.
I don't want to put the blame back and forth, just like you said. I'll take the blame. I'm sorry. I want this thing to work with the Rockers.
And if you want to go on your own, then walk off and leave. If you want to stick together and make this thing work, when I turn around, we're going to shake hands, and we're going to go on and rock and roll like the Rockers can do.
He waits a second, listens to the crowd saying, you know, stay together, stay together. And he spins me around. We shake hands.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Rockers!
Told you. You know, and the crowd goes crazy. I look that way, and he turns, wham!
Good. Oh, I knew he was going to do that. I just knew he was going to do that.
He kicked me so hard I didn't feel the glass.
Right through the glass window of the barber shop.
The fans didn't want the team to break up, no doubt. Nobody saw it coming.
That's, which really made it the moment. It, in a way, it really broke my heart.
Oh, he's hurt.
I think we seemed like best friends, to the people, so it really kind of broke their heart for us to split, but then to split that way.
What a despicable act that was.
It was a career-defining moment for both of them, but in really, I hate to say it, in two different ways. For Shawn, it was, a launching pad, and he took it.
It's a problem with you, Shawn. Rockers are history.
And Marty, if he could have just stayed out of his own way, could have had the same ascension as what Shawn did. And I think that's where you could see the two, go different paths.
Following a tumultuous relationship soured by excessive partying and physical fights, the Rockers finally split, leaving Shawn and Marty to pursue their separate journeys as singles wrestlers.
He was a little upset, and then he's, what's supposed to happen to me? And I said, well, what's going to happen with both of us? We're both going to then get judged on whatever our careers take. As soon as you get over it, they're going to use you. Plain and simple.
Things definitely had changed. It's almost like they weren't a tag team at all. It got a little ugly.
I think Marty resented Shawn at that point, and I think Shawn's trying to distance himself from Marty because he was, making his way up the ladder, and so he was trying to get as far away from him as he could.
Marty lives for the moment. He just makes really bad decisions.
One of the girls I was seeing down in Tampa, we went to a club, and she was a dancer, a stripper, dancer, whatever, exotic dancer, there we go. There was a policeman on the premises, passed me down, and he pulls out a little baggie of cocaine. We got arrested, and I did 6 months house arrest for that.
He's got multiple stories of getting kicked out of multiple countries because he got arrested for doing something.
Hammer's just waiting to get his ass home.
It was in India. It was a 5-star hotel. Marty goes up to a cop.
Can I ride? Can I ride?
Asks if he can ride his motorcycle. I'm sure the cop is thinking he's going to drive down the street. Marty goes up the stairs of this hotel. For some reason, the doorman opens the door.
And there's all these people around the fountain. And then he goes straight inside the lobby.
And then wipes out and knocks one of the dudes into the fountain.
It was just like, did he really do that? I mean...
My spot. He's been in trouble now with the law. They booted him out for a minute.
He and the Iron Sheik, I think he's ahead by one of the number of times that a person's been fired and then brought back and fired again and brought back.
Marty Jannetty! That's Marty Jannetty!
And then they did the whole New Rockers thing, which Marty feels Shawn actually was the one who suggested it to kind of sabotage and make people not think of the original Rockers.
Here we go with a new rocker!
The problem was, I don't think Marty was 100% invested in it. I don't blame him. It kind of took a swing at what he and Shawn had accomplished and what they had done.
They'll make you think they're really planning to do something with you, but they're really you're just a filler for the card. And that's when Marty realized it was time to go.
He went to WCW, and it looked like they were really going to get behind him. They were going to try to do something major with him, but Marty kind of got in his own way again.
In WCW, he was in trouble with the law. He'd gotten several DUIs. One led eventually to him losing his license for 10 years.
The contract ran out, and then that was it. He just kind of floundered after that.
Do you think it hurt Marty when Shawn Stark was rising without him?
It devastated him to the point where he had posters of Shawn on his wall with darts. And he would just try to hit him in the most perfect spots.
By the late 1990s, Marty struggles to compete on the indie circuit and eventually vanishes from the public eye. Following a string of DUI charges, jail stints, and substance abuse issues, Marty spirals for the next 5 years before finally hitting rock bottom.
The first time I'd ever considered ending life, it was like, I've had enough. What I was going to do is buy the biggest pile of cocaine and just do it until my heart busted. So that was my conversation with the higher power, was, if you don't want me doing this, you need to let me know. And you know I'm pretty stupid, so make it obvious. Like you were given a sign, you make it obvious to my dumb ass. And the phone rang, I looked down, didn't recognize the number. And that call that came in was Sean calling me. And he was inviting me to, it's called AIM, it's an Athletes International Ministry. He wanted me to go to that in Phoenix, Arizona. He goes, I'll take care of everything, don't worry about that, but I would like you to be my guest. You know, before he made that call to me, we ain't talked in person, on the phone in 7, 8 years. And that's when it hit me like, holy shit. I mean, you asked for a sign? And then I did go out to Arizona, and then, you know, Sean ended up, you know, did the baptized thing where they dunk you in the water. Sean ended up being the one to dunk me in the water. And we did all that, and for like 3 weeks, I lived the most pure life. Now that all that has happened, I get a phone call from WWE. You know, they want to do a rocker reunion. So, of course, you know. Yeah, so we're at the curtain now. It's a rocker reunion. I've been off TV for so many years. Now it's start getting nervous, and Sean picked up on it. He goes, what's wrong? I said, man, what if they don't remember me? And he goes, are you kidding me? He goes, we were the Rockers. Nobody's going to forget us. As you said that, the music hit. And I go out there and they pop. And I was like, wow. But the amazing thing with Sean and I was how we were so in tune with each other. Like we became one when we tagged together. Even when we bounced over the rope and went down, would be our feet would hit the floor at the same time. Everything was in unison as a one.
They haven't missed the beat. They haven't lost the step.
But the next day, that's when they told me, well, you're a hell of a match. You have that site. They want to give you a contract. The way we're going to use you, you'll make over $1 million. Couldn't ask for a better, you know, comeback. To end up in jail a week later.
After a successful Rockers reunion, the WWF plans to continue featuring Marty on a regular basis. But trouble with the law once again prevents him from capitalizing on the opportunity.
So wifey, we got to the apartment and got into a big fight. And the neighbor called the police, and police show up. They were like, oh, he's on probation. Go get him. So I'm in jail now.
And I just saw him and that stripper girl a week before, and I warned him about her, and then a week later, they got in a big fight, and he got arrested, which eventually had him in the house arrest, and he lost his job. And he had just gotten that was his last shot. But guess what's the common denominator? Hanging out with strippers that do drugs and things like that, that's a lot of fun. I like that too. But don't be surprised if it bites you in the ass.
Vince, he's like, gosh, I love Marty. I love him. Great guy, but he's got the biggest black cloud over his head. Yeah, I mean, and it's true. When Vince recognizes that, you know, and he's one of the smartest people I've ever met.
He does have a black cloud that follows him around, but he's the one that's, you know, putting it up there. You know what I mean? And keeping it on a leash to follow him, you know? It doesn't have to be that way.
Hold on, time out. Yeah, it's so swollen I can't even get the pants leg up. Sometimes when that crap's acting up, then I get like lightheaded. So I was just looking at y'all, I'm like, oh, they're fading out. Oh, shit.
You ever worry about Marty?
I do worry about him because he's alone, even though he says he has a lot of telephone girlfriends and whatnot.
You know, in the last years, I would see him and he'd be still trying to get in the ring and trying to wrestle, and his ankle was horrible. It's ridiculous. I don't even know how he got around. I was able to walk or anything. His audience now, instead of being out around the ring, is the internet, is Facebook. Yeah.
I think that Facebook makes him feel like he's not housebound, which for the most part, he is with his injury.
So he can reach out and touch people. They can, you know, respond to him and get reaction from people.
I think his life feeds off of that because of the way we grew up. We grew up wanting that every night, right? And then all of a sudden one day, you know, you see that there's no more of that. And social media is right there.
He sits around and he's trying to think, okay, what can I think of funny for the book? He sits around and tries to come up with a funny story. And those are the ones you know are bullshit.
The post about you and your daughter.
No, I didn't do the post about the daughter thing. That was complete hack. I didn't even see it to know to defend it or anything. And I was hearing all these things like, you wouldn't have sex with your daughter? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I mean, she didn't deserve any of that. I mean, neither did I, but I mean, she certainly didn't. I mean, I'm a little wacko on the internet. That's another reason, you know, anything wacky like that is believable because, well, Marty.
There are lots of things that I see Marty post on Facebook, and I'm like, what are you doing? And there was a point where there were a lot of holy shit moments.
So Marty Jannetty is trending on Twitter because he says that he was 13 years old. Someone grabbed him, dragged him to the back of a bowling alley. And then here's a quote from Marty Jannetty on the Facebook post. He said, "That was the very first time I made a man disappear."
One of my sheriff friends, he called me, goes, "What did you do?" And I said, "Are you talking about the post on Facebook?" He goes, "I don't know. I just know they're putting a warrant out to go arrest you."
The Columbus, Georgia Police Department told TMZ, "The first step we'll be seeing if we have any missing persons or unidentified remains cases that match the limited information in the post." I mean, if something happened, I mean, it is not out of the realm of possibility that they could solve this crime.
When my friends in Germany are sending me the newspapers, and on the headlines is Mauler Marty kills man. I mean, what the I mean, what happened to the rapist? You were more concerned that a kid just tried to save himself, and it ended up accidentally. It's called accidental deaths for a reason.
There was a big story about your claim that you made a man disappear after an attempted rape on your person as a teenager. Did you realize how public this was going to get within, like, police involvement?
No, hell no.
The police showed up on his doorstep. I mean, this thing went all the way. They investigated.
I had to deal with police. I was scared to go to the airport. That's the only reason I had to tell that it was a storyline, you know, so they would leave me alone.
Let's talk hypothetical, okay?
Hypothetical.
Hypothetically, whatever the story was, hypothetically, that this did happen.
Okay.
Tell me the story.
Okay. So this is the bowling alley. They used to be called Victory Lane. When I was 14, I worked here. The dude that worked the front desk, he also was somebody to buy weed from. When I went to buy the weed from the guy, I went out in the parking lot and sat in the car. As he gave me the bag, and he reached over and he put his hand in my crotch and said, "What's this?" And I smacked his hand. I said, "No, not me." He got a little aggressive off of that. And he chased and grabbed and got me to the back. Big boy, man, he got me down and got on top. You know, he was trying to get to my pants, take my pants down. You know, I'm got a 200-pound weight on me, so this is as far as I can go, and it's right there. And it was about this size, maybe a touch bigger, maybe. But he was like, "Get off me!" You know, I'm just trying to get him off. And evidently, I caught him in the wrong place. In the temple that can end your life. You know, I'm thinking, don't know what to do. I mean, do I tell the police? And I thought I'd go get my family member. We both agreed, can't call the police. You know, we thought that would be the wrong move. On the other side of the trees, the far back trees, that's Chattahoochee River. So, you know, we got to get it to the river. This is all hypothetical. Remember that, Columbus Police Department. It's the storyline for wrestling. With what happened in the car with the grab, and that, I'll give that. That's truth. If you're gonna write a storyline for wrestling, but you take something that happened and you magnify it. I mean, I see now that that was too much of a storyline. They did a missing persons. They didn't find nobody. So, I mean, that should be the end of it.
No body, no crime for Marty.
I love Marty dearly, and I just want him to be happy. I fear that he's going to be alone because this becomes your life, you know? And now what do you do when you got to keep going on living, but your life died?
Marty, we love you. Keep your hands off my wife. The future is bright, Marty. Give it a chance. There are people that love you out there.
I'm one of them, and I had thought about maybe flashing you, Marty, but I'm mic'd up, so you're missing out.
There's a thing in the wrestling business about, you know, oh, I don't want to be the Marty Jannetty of the team. Let me tell you something. You'd be lucky if you were, because there would certainly not be a Shawn Michaels at the level that Shawn Michaels was if it was not for Marty Jannetty.
How do you feel about Shawn Michaels today?
I love him to death. I mean, there was 7 years of undeniably the best relationship two people could have. And then, you know, from ever since the phone call, it's been great again. So, yeah, I love him to death, you know.
He and I worked together, 24 hours a day for 7 years. You know, I mean, for all that time, for us to get in maybe one fight is not bad at all.
Can't hold something from this in your rearview mirror out in front of the street, you know, in front of you, that's back there. You know, on the real side of it, I didn't drag him to the river. One of my buddies, we drug him over the woods and poured gas on him and burned him up.
And maybe I even heard that if they burn, they don't burn as much as you think they would, and there's a lot of bones that you got to bury them.
That is the story that he told me, yes.
And when did he tell you that?
When we were partners.
So this is in the 90s he told you this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, you told us that Marty tells a lot of big stories, and 99% of the time we should take it with a grain of salt. This story is not a lie? You think this is true?
This is absolutely true. He told me a long time ago that did happen, yes. Because I can look at him in the face, and I can listen to the story and tell when he's telling the truth and when he's not, you know?
So is it possible that this storyline explanation has to do with the fact that you don't?
You got as much as you can get.
Yeah.
That's as much as I can give you. Hypothetically or not, there it is. Sometimes you got to look through the smoke. Smoke and mirrors does a lot.
How his broken body could even manage the climb. Foley himself admits he had no idea how he was going to survive, but he had made a pledge to finish the performance. The audience watched in absolute amazement. This was the defining moment that truly made Mick Foley a legendary star. The next sequence was supposed to be far less concerning. The plan was for The Undertaker to execute a choke slam on the roof, gradually causing the mesh to give way for a dramatic visual. But that did not happen. Instead, the mesh completely ruptured. Foley plummeted directly through the roof, crashing violently onto the ring mat below. The ring mat is not a soft cushion. It is essentially concrete layered with a thin mat. As he fell, a heavy steel folding chair followed him through the hole, striking him directly in the face upon impact. This was completely unplanned. Backstage, the atmosphere turned to sheer terror. Colette Foley screamed at her television set in absolute fury, feeling betrayed because her husband had not warned her about this second fall. In the ring, Foley lay completely motionless. It was the first time in his career he had been legitimately knocked unconscious. Officials flooded the cage once more, genuinely fearing this was the end of his life. The Undertaker looked down from the broken roof and instructed Terry Funk to check if Foley was still breathing. Funk reported back that he was alive. Recognizing the crisis, Funk brilliantly improvised, attacking The Undertaker to draw the audience's focus away from the medical emergency so doctors could tend to Foley. For 42 terrifying seconds, Foley was lost to the world. If there was ever a match in history that should have been officially stopped, it was this one. But in that era, they did not stop matches. They bought time. When Foley finally regained consciousness, the first thing he saw was Terry Funk's shoes. As the fog cleared, his singular focus returned to creating television drama. He realized he had a massive, gaping wound underneath his lip. In a grotesque display of showmanship, he purposely pushed his tongue through the open wound and smiled for the cameras. Adding to the horrifying visual, the impact of the steel chair had knocked one of his front teeth entirely out of its socket, lodging it firmly up his nostril. The match was terrifyingly real. You could look into Foley's eyes and see that nobody was home. Yet, operating purely on instinct, he demanded the match continue. He called for thousands of metal thumbtacks to be spilled onto the mat, purposely rolling his battered body through them to ensure the fans got the maximum spectacle. When adrenaline takes over, a competitor no longer realizes the pain. They become part of it. Finally, after 17 agonizing minutes, The Undertaker secured the victory. The 16,000 fans in the arena were in a state of absolute awe. They recognized the authentic, near-fatal sacrifice unfolding before their eyes. This level of extreme realism cemented the audience firmly in Foley's corner. He understood that risking his absolute well-being allowed the fans to completely believe in him, and the emotional experience he provided. The aftermath was highly emotional. Colette Foley waited in agonizing silence for a phone call that usually came immediately after his events. When he finally called hours later, she screamed at him, devastated that their children thought their father had perished. Her trust was severely shaken. Backstage, the moment Foley walked through the curtain, the entire locker room rushed to check on his survival. Vince McMahon himself approached Foley, thanking him for his incredible sacrifice, but demanding a promise that Foley would never attempt anything like that again. Foley, still heavily concussed, asked The Undertaker if they had remembered to use the thumbtacks, completely oblivious to the fact that the doctor was actively plucking them out of his flesh at that very moment. The physical toll was catastrophic. Foley required 15 stitches underneath his lip. He lost 2 front teeth. He suffered a bruised kidney that lingered for 6 weeks. His jaw was dislocated, his shoulder was dislocated, and he sustained a severe concussion. But that single night fundamentally changed the trajectory of his career. Just 6 months after McMahon claimed he did not want Foley in a ring, Foley became the world champion. However, the pressure to maintain his status as the hardcore legend pushed the bar dangerously high. He felt an intense obligation to continually over-deliver for the fans. Just 7 months later, Foley pushed his physical limits again in a brutal I Quit match against The Rock. Despite warnings from colleagues, Foley instructed The Rock not to hold back. What was intended to be 5 steel chair shots escalated into 11 unprotected, sickening strikes to the head while Foley was handcuffed and defenseless. His young children sat in the front row, unable to separate the fictional storyline from the terrifying reality that their father was suffering legitimate brain trauma. Colette Foley recalls it as one of the worst days of her entire life. His daughter Noelle completely blocked the memories from her mind, possessing no recollection of her father ever wrestling due to the immense psychological trauma. As analysts, we must look at the grim reality of these decisions. Back then, The medical community did not fully understand the long-term devastation of repeated concussions. Every major impact in the ring is comparable to experiencing a 25-mile-per-hour car accident. Today, Foley pays a heavy price. The looming threat of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a degenerative brain disease caused by repetitive trauma, is a terrifying reality for his family. There were dark periods where Foley would drive his vehicle and completely forget where he lived. After a discouraging appointment with the company neurologist, Foley sought an independent medical evaluation. The doctor delivered a chilling verdict. He advised Foley to never wrestle again. Today, Foley fights against the fading light. He utilizes spoken word tours as mental gymnastics to keep his mind sharp, still chasing the stimulation and the roar of a live audience. He actively chooses to appreciate the life he built rather than live in complete fear of the unknown. He lived his ultimate dream, securing the absolute acceptance of total strangers. For many years, Foley harbored deep resentment toward the Hell in a Cell match, feeling that his entire, diverse career had been overshadowed by one night of sheer violence. He fell into a dark psychological space, feeling as though he had accomplished nothing else of value. But a poignant conversation with The Undertaker shifted his perspective. The Undertaker reminded him that what they created that night would outlive them both. That profound realization allowed Foley to finally embrace his legacy. A deeply emotional moment occurred years later when Foley and his daughter visited the company warehouse. Unexpectedly coming face to face with the original steel cell, Foley reached out, touched the rusted metal, and began to openly weep. It was a stark realization of how easily that structure could have ended his life, and a profound acknowledgement of his survival. When looking back at the history of this industry, there is perhaps no reward large enough to truly cover the physical risks taken by Mick Foley. He viewed the wrestling ring as a massive canvas, allowing him to create surreal, sublime performance art. Trading his physical health for the roar of the crowd was a sacrifice he willingly made. Was it a dangerously crazy masterpiece? Absolutely. But on those specific nights, when the narrative clicked and the audience erupted, it provided one of the most powerful feelings in the world, cementing Mick Foley's legacy as an eternal icon of sports entertainment. The date was June 28, 1998. The setting was the World Wrestling Federation's King of the Ring pay-per-view event, held in front of a packed house of 16,000 people at the Pittsburgh Civic Arena. What unfolded that night would etch itself into the annals of sports entertainment as one of the most shocking, terrifying, and defining matches in the history of professional wrestling. It was The Undertaker versus Mankind inside the unforgiving steel structure known as Hell in a Cell. Looking back at this moment, Hell in a Cell hits you like a mallet to the consciousness. As an observer who has sat ringside for countless hours of combat, I knew the concept was going to be intense, but I do not think anyone could have predicted the sheer madness that would ensue. You had two talents out there who loved to push the envelope until it teetered right over the edge. We all know that professional wrestling involves a great deal of showmanship. But as the saying goes, you cannot fake gravity. I have been frightened by many things in this industry over the years, but nothing terrified me quite as much as that match did. What left fans completely stunned was the unrelenting, sheer punishment that Mick Foley, performing as Mankind, endured until you watched it unfold with your own eyes. You simply would not believe that a human being could physically absorb that level of trauma and live to tell the tale. The pain was real. The drama was real. Behind the scenes and at ringside, colleagues were cursing, screaming, and questioning his sanity, wondering why anyone would subject themselves to such extreme danger. Today, the legacy of that infamous Hell in a Cell match persists as both an epic masterpiece of ring psychology and a grim cautionary tale. According to many who were there, the industry dodged several bullets that night. To understand how a man arrives at the top of a 20-foot steel cage with the intent to fall, you have to examine the psychology of the performer. Everyone who enters the professional wrestling business is usually searching for something missing in their own lives. For Mick Foley, the drive stemmed from a deep-seated need for acceptance. By his own admission, he was teased heavily in his youth, creating an overwhelming desire to be liked. This desire manifested in extreme ways. He once recalled a time as a college sophomore when he swallowed red food coloring and took a massive leap off a bed onto a concrete floor. When he spit out the fake blood concoction, the horrified reaction of his peers made him feel a unique kind of power. He realized that if he could not make people love him, perhaps he could captivate them by disgusting them. He needed to generate a reaction. Foley built his career on this very premise. His normal matches were notoriously brutal, involving thumbtacks, fire, barbed wire, and even composition for explosives during his tours in Japan. He was known to take devastating falls directly onto concrete floors. According to his family, including his daughter Noelle, he thrived on eliciting shock from the audience. Realism was his greatest tool. He believed that a match was only successful if he struggled to walk back to his hotel room afterward. He did not necessarily enjoy the physical pain, but he deeply enjoyed the art of enduring it and portraying it for the audience's entertainment. His wife, Colette Foley, who has known him for over 35 years, saw the duality of the man. Beneath the rugged exterior and the terrible jokes was a gentle person whose wedding song was beauty and the beast. She understood his unwavering commitment to his craft. When the adrenaline pumped, Mick wanted nothing more than for the audience to leave talking about how great the show was. Regardless of the personal risk, this relentless drive led to the creation of his alter ego, Cactus Jack, a wild and seemingly insane brawler who captivated audiences with his unpredictable charisma. As Jim Cornette, an agent and producer for the World Wrestling Federation at the time, analyzed, Mick possessed an incredible grasp of ring psychology. He knew the fans craved a performer who appeared completely out of control, someone who defied the standard script. By taking the audience on that chaotic ride, his reputation grew. In his early days, Foley's dedication was absolute. He and Colette lived modestly, their bedroom furniture consisting of a mattress on the floor and a black and white television with a faulty videocassette recorder. He would spend up to 12 hours a day studying Japanese wrestling tapes, fascinated by the realism and storytelling that utilized the entire environment as an opponent. Japan seemed to be his destiny, especially when he was brought in to feud with the legendary Terry Funk. Funk, a master at making audiences suspend their disbelief, became a mentor to Mick. Together, they engaged in explosive, fiery death matches that cemented Foley's reputation for extreme combat. Despite his international success, the World Wrestling Federation initially seemed out of reach. The company was operating in a very family-friendly era, and Foley's brutal style did not seem to fit. According to Al Snow, a fellow wrestler and close friend, Chairman Vince McMahon did not originally want Mick Foley, believing he lacked marketability. It was Jim Ross, the vice president of talent relations, who championed Foley. The World Wrestling Federation needed a fresh, unpredictable opponent for their top star, The Undertaker. They had previously fed giants to The Undertaker, which often resulted in dull encounters. What they needed was a lunatic. Vince McMahon eventually agreed to hire him, but under the condition that Foley's face would be covered. The result was the character of Mankind, a disturbed, masked figure. Fellow Hall of Famer Gerald Briscoe noted that this bizarre character concept would not have worked for anyone other than Mick Foley. Foley threw his entire being into the role, pulling his own hair out and establishing a deep, unsettling connection with the audience. He was willing to try absolutely anything to make the character a success. The rivalry between Mankind and The Undertaker became a cornerstone of the company, spanning multiple pay-per-view and television matches across the globe. However, by 1998, Foley felt his character had plateaued. He needed to do something drastic to elevate their legacy. The producers planned to reignite their feud using the newly developed Hell in a Cell concept. The first iteration of this match, featuring The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, was a masterclass in storytelling. When Foley reviewed that match, he realized he could not replicate the incredible athletic feats of those two performers. Seeking advice, Foley turned to Terry Funk. In a casual conversation, Funk jokingly suggested that Mick should start the match on top of the cage and get thrown off. While Funk laughed, Foley saw an opportunity. The idea took root in his mind, and he eventually pitched it to The Undertaker and Mr. McMahon. Neither was thrilled. The Undertaker was extremely hesitant about throwing Mick off the structure, but Foley's determination eventually won them over. Going into the match, Foley viewed this not as a second act for his career, but as a desperate attempt to keep his head above water before walking away from the business entirely. When the night arrived, the atmosphere in the arena was thick with anticipation. Jimmy Corderas, a referee and ring crew member, watched from the production area alongside Gerald Briscoe. When Mankind's music hit, the crowd watched in bewilderment as he immediately scaled the massive steel structure. As Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler called the action, confusion swept through the arena. The match was supposed to start inside the cage. Despite his outward confidence when pitching the idea, Foley later admitted he was terrified once he reached the top, as he was not comfortable with heights. The situation escalated quickly when The Undertaker made his entrance and climbed up to meet him. Together, the two men weighed nearly 600 pounds. The roof of the cage, held together by zip ties, began to give way under their combined weight, sinking noticeably with every step. The sound of zip ties snapping echoed through the arena, signaling an immediate, unscripted danger. Foley attempted to execute a maneuver on top of the weakening mesh, but The Undertaker wisely prevented it, realizing the roof might collapse. The brawl moved toward the edge of the structure, directly above the broadcast position. In the production area and at the commentary desk, observers grew increasingly anxious. The margin for error was non-existent. Then it happened. From nearly 20 feet in the air, a 300-pound man was flung from the top of the cage, plummeting toward the Spanish announce table. Witnesses described the moment as happening in a horrifying slow motion. Yet over in the blink of an eye, the sickening crash of Foley's body destroying the table sent a shockwave of panic through the backstage area. It was akin to witnessing a fatal car accident. Many colleagues genuinely believed they had just watched a man die. In a business built on controlled illusions, this was a terrifying dose of reality. Children in the audience were horrified, with parents desperately trying to assure them it was all pretend, even as they themselves panicked. Miraculously, Foley had turned his body in mid-air, landing as flatly as possible on the table to cushion the impact. Had The Undertaker thrown him just a fraction too far or too short, Foley would have hit the concrete floor, likely resulting in a fatal outcome. As medical personnel, including Dr. Francois Petit, rushed to ringside, the broadcast team struggled to process the trauma. Terry Funk was among the first to reach Foley's lifeless body. The emergency medical technicians brought out a gurney, planning to transport him to the local hospital. The match appeared to be over. The cage was raised to allow the medical team space to work. But as the adrenaline surged through his veins, Foley made a decision that defied all medical logic. He rolled off the gurney and began to climb the cage a second time. Backstage personnel and fans alike screamed for him to stop, questioning his sanity. Yet, this unfathomable display of resilience cemented his status as a legendary figure in the eyes of the audience. The match resumed on top of the battered structure. The next planned sequence was supposed to be much safer. The Undertaker was to execute a choke slam, causing the mesh to safely give way and visually stuff Foley into the ring below. However, the integrity of the cage had already been compromised. When The Undertaker delivered the move, the mesh completely tore apart. This was not a controlled fall. This was a catastrophic accident. Foley plummeted straight down, crashing violently onto the ring mat, which offered little more forgiveness than solid cement. To make matters worse, a heavy steel folding chair fell through the opening right behind him, striking him brutally in the face upon impact. The reaction backstage was one of absolute terror. Unlike the first fall, Foley was legitimately knocked unconscious. Colleagues flooded the ringside area, fearing the absolute worst. Dr. Petit and Terry Funk entered the ring. The Undertaker, looking down from the torn roof, checked to see if his opponent was still breathing. Foley lay motionless for 42 agonizing seconds. To buy time for the medical team, Terry Funk improvised a physical confrontation with The Undertaker, shifting the camera's focus away from the injured star. By today's standards, the match would have been immediately stopped. But in that era, the show pressed on. When Foley finally regained consciousness, the first thing he saw were Terry Funk's shoes. Driven by an incomprehensible dedication to the performance, Foley struggled to his feet. He was a battered, bloodied mess. A massive wound had opened beneath his lip, and a dislodged tooth was visibly protruding through his nasal passage. The result of the chair impact forcing the tooth backward into his airway. Yet amidst the carnage, Foley focused on the television cameras, famously pushing his tongue through his torn lip to create a lasting, macabre image for the broadcast. The match continued into its final, grueling phase, incorporating thousands of steel thumbtacks. Foley willingly threw himself onto the sharp hazards, his body running purely on shock and adrenaline. Finally, after 17 grueling minutes, The Undertaker secured the victory. As Foley refused a stretcher and walked to the back under his own power, the crowd of 16,000 erupted in absolute awe. The aftermath of Hell in a Cell was a sobering reality check. Colette Foley, who usually received a reassuring phone call after events, waited in agonizing silence. When Mick finally called hours later, the relief was instantly replaced by anger over the sheer trauma he had inflicted upon his family. Backstage, Vince McMahon personally thanked Foley for his incredible sacrifice, but strictly warned him never to attempt anything of that magnitude again. The physical toll was staggering. Foley suffered a dislocated jaw, a dislocated shoulder, a bruised kidney that plagued him for 6 weeks, the loss of 2 teeth, and required 15 stitches below his lip. The long-term neurological impact was not even properly assessed at the time. Yet, the match sparked a career renaissance, transforming Foley from a perceived mid-card attraction into a world champion within 6 months. However, the precedent had been set, and the bar for extreme performance had been permanently raised. Just 7 months later, Foley engaged in another deeply controversial bout, an I Quit match against The Rock. Despite warnings from colleagues, Foley insisted on a brutal finish involving unprotected steel chair shots to the head. The plan called for 5 strikes, but the chaotic nature of the live event resulted in Foley absorbing 11 devastating blows to his unprotected skull. The broadcast of that match was deeply disturbing, especially for Foley's young children who watched in horror from the front row. The collateral damage of these decisions became impossible to ignore. His daughter Noelle later reflected on the sickening reality that a normal person could have easily died from such head trauma, noting that the event left her with a mental block, erasing her childhood memories of her father's in-ring career. As the years progressed, the medical consequences of Foley's career choices became glaringly apparent. Repetitive concussions began to take their toll. He experienced terrifying moments of memory loss, such as forgetting the route to his own home. Independent neurologists explicitly warned him that continuing to wrestle would leave him crippled. Today, the shadow of chronic traumatic encephalopathy looms large over his life, a terrifying long-term effect of repetitive brain trauma. His family lives with the daily anxiety of what his cognitive health will look like in 10 or 20 years. To combat the cognitive decline, Foley has taken to performing spoken word shows, using the mental gymnastics of storytelling to keep his mind sharp and to continue feeling the audience's connection. He chooses to appreciate the life he is rather than living in fear of the unknown. When analyzing the saga of Mick Foley and the Hell in a Cell match, one must ask the ultimate question, was it worth it? Foley himself has admitted that there is no financial reward significant enough to justify the risks he took, and he acknowledges the ignorance of head injuries during that era. Yet, he also recognizes that his willingness to sacrifice his physical well-being is the very reason he achieved legendary status. He viewed the wrestling ring as a canvas for sublime performance art, driven by an authentic desire to be loved by total strangers. According to those closest to him, the legacy of that match is deeply complex. Years later, while visiting a corporate warehouse, Foley unexpectedly encountered the original cell structure. The sight of the rusted steel brought him to tears, a rare emotional release that underscored the gravity of what he had survived. The Hell in a Cell match will forever stand as a testament to the incredible limits of human endurance and the powerful, sometimes dangerous lengths a performer will go to in order to achieve immortality under the television lights. Ladies and gentlemen, step into the shadows of the squared circle with me. We are about to explore a night that permanently altered the landscape of professional wrestling. On June 28, 1998, at the World Wrestling Federation's King of the Ring pay-per-view event, a single match earned its undisputed place as one of the most shocking and visceral displays in sports entertainment history. The combatants were The Undertaker and Mankind. The battleground was Hell in a Cell. Hell in a Cell hits you like a mallet to the consciousness. As an observer, I knew it was going to be chaotic, but nobody knew it was going to cross the boundaries of human endurance. We had two unique talents out there who liked to push the envelope until it teetered over the absolute edge. People often say that professional wrestling is predetermined, but let me tell you something, you cannot fake gravity. Throughout my years of analyzing this industry, I have been frightened by a lot of things. However, nothing frightened me as much as that structure did, at least until the match actually unfolded. What left fans completely stunned was the unrelenting punishment that Mick Foley, performing as Mankind, voluntarily endured. Until you saw it with your own eyes, you simply did not believe that a human being could physically sustain such impact and live to tell the tale. This match was real. The pain was real. The drama was profoundly real. Backstage and in the living rooms of fans across the globe, people were screaming, cursing, and calling him a foolish man for risking his life. People kept asking the screen, "Why are you doing this?" As one of wrestling's most infamous matches, the legacy of this Hell in a Cell encounter persists as both an epic theatrical success and a grim cautionary tale. According to the accounts of those involved, many felt they dodged multiple fatal bullets that day. It remains deeply unsettling to realize that the industry standards of the time allowed someone to be knocked completely unconscious and then simply continue a brutal exhibition. The collateral damage that ensued from this single night is an entirely different story, forcing us to ask, when does it stop? When is the spectacle enough? You pay all day long for the decisions you make during your 15 minutes in the spotlight. It was, without a doubt, a dangerously crazy masterpiece. But all of us, from the commentators to the fans to the executives, need to ask ourselves a vital question: was it truly worth it? To understand the madness, we must understand the man. Everyone who enters the grueling world of professional wrestling is searching for something they find missing in their own personal lives. For Mick Foley, the driving force was a deep psychological need. According to Foley himself, he was teased heavily in his youth, which birthed an overwhelming, almost desperate need to be liked and accepted. He wanted the approval of the audience as much as he wanted the World Wrestling Federation championship belt. Foley's unique relationship with pain began long before the bright lights of national television. As a college sophomore, he famously pulled a stunt that defined his future trajectory. He took a swig of red food coloring, climbed up, and executed a spectacular diving leap off a bed, crashing onto a stuffed atom resting on a concrete floor. Upon hitting the unforgiving ground, he spat out the fake blood concoction. The entire dormitory was watching. When one of the female students yelled out that it was the most disgusting thing she had ever seen, Foley did not feel shame, he felt power. He realized that if he could not make people love him through traditional means, perhaps he could captivate them by disgusting them. He just needed to get a reaction. This philosophy birthed the hardcore legend. But Hell in a Cell is often seen as the perfect gateway for new fans, a fact that brings mixed emotions. Many modern viewers point to this specific match as their introduction to the sport. The inevitable follow-up question to those new fans is usually, did you expect all wrestling matches to be like that? Because the reality is, they are not. A standard Mick Foley match was a portrait of brutality. It often involved blood, thumbtacks, and fire. He built a career on moments that made fans cover their eyes in pure shock. He wrestled in barbed wire. He endured being blown up by Composition 4 explosives in the rings of Japan. He was speared through flaming tables and took devastating falls directly onto exposed concrete. He put his physical vessel through an unimaginable amount of trauma. His family bore witness to all of this. His daughter, Noelle Foley, has noted that her father genuinely loved eliciting those horrified, visceral reactions from the crowd. Realism was his greatest tool. In his own mind, Foley did not believe he had delivered a good performance unless he struggled to walk back to his hotel room later that night. It was not that he intrinsically enjoyed the physical pain itself, but rather he enjoyed his unique ability to absorb that punishment and sell it to the audience in a way that was wildly entertaining. His wife, Colette Foley, who has known Mick for over 35 years, provides a sharp contrast to the monstrous characters he portrayed. When she first met him, she noticed his gentle eyes. He was a kind person with terrible, corny humor, and that is what made her fall in love. Their wedding song was, fittingly, Beauty and the Beast. They were a solid team, and Colette understood his absolute commitment to his craft. When Foley's adrenaline was pumping, his sole objective was to ensure the fans left the arena talking about how phenomenal the show was, even at great risk to his own physical safety. This drive pushed him to become increasingly reckless. Before he was Mankind, he developed a persona known as Cactus Jack. Cactus Jack was wild, unpredictable, and seemingly insane. But beneath the chaotic exterior, Foley possessed undeniable charisma. You could not take your eyes off him. Jim Cornette, who worked as an agent and producer for the World Wrestling Federation at the time, observed that Foley was a master of ring psychology. He understood that the audience craved unpredictability. By appearing out of control and seemingly going off the script, Foley took the fans on a wild ride, manipulating their emotions and eliciting exactly the response he desired. Through this relentless dedication, his reputation grew. His journey to the top was not glamorous. In his early days, Foley and Colette's bedroom furniture consisted of a simple mattress on the floor and a small black and white television connected to a struggling video cassette recorder. On that screen, Foley would consume up to 12 hours of Japanese wrestling tapes a day. He was captivated by the realism and the gritty storytelling. In those tapes, it was not merely man versus man. It was man attempting to survive his hazardous surroundings. Foley believed his future lay in Japan. The promoters overseas were searching for a foreign talent to feud with the legendary Terry Funk. Funk was considered the greatest of all time when it came to making an audience suspend their disbelief. Funk became a mentor to Foley, and together they engaged in explosive, bloody, and fiery death matches across Japan. Foley was naturally drawn to the extreme elements. He believed that crawling out of a ring on his hands and knees was tangible proof that he had created something special. He viewed this extreme style as the only way he could stand out in a crowded industry. And, because of this, he never envisioned himself fitting into the pristine corporate mold of the World Wrestling Federation. At that time, the World Wrestling Federation was not presenting mature, edgy content. It was heavily tailored toward general audiences. It was a very polished, sanitized product. Foley's gritty, self-destructive style clashed heavily with what the company was selling. According to Al Snow, a former superstar and Foley's travel partner, the chairman of the company, Vince McMahon simply did not want Mick Foley. McMahon did not view Foley as a marketable or attractive athlete. It took the persistence of Jim Ross, the vice president of talent relations, to convince McMahon to take a gamble on Foley. Ross saw a rare, raw potential in him. Ross needed compelling opponents for the top stars of the company, particularly The Undertaker, who was one of the biggest attractions in wrestling history. For months, McMahon had been feeding giant, lumbering opponents to The Undertaker, a formula that was quickly becoming stale and boring. Ross argued that what The Undertaker truly needed was not another giant, but a lunatic. Legend has it that McMahon finally slammed his hand on a table in frustration, agreeing to bring Foley in, but under one strict condition: they had to cover his face. McMahon insisted the audience should not know who he was, perceiving Foley as a nobody. Gerald Briscoe, a Hall of Fame producer, recalled the monumental challenge the creative team faced. They were essentially told to build a compelling character out of nothing. The result was Mankind, a deranged, masked figure who lived in boiler rooms and pulled his own hair out in fits of agony. This bizarre concept would have failed miserably in the hands of almost any other performer. But Foley possessed a profound connection to the audience. Without that connection, a character is meaningless, but fans can always sense genuine commitment. Foley threw himself into the role completely. As Briscoe fondly noted, Foley was willing to try absolutely anything to make the character work. The challenge for the executives suddenly shifted from getting him over with the crowd to preventing him from accidentally killing himself in the ring. The initial feud between Mankind and The Undertaker was highly successful, spanning 7 pay-per-view events and 10 television matches. They traveled the globe together, building a legendary rivalry. However, by the summer of 1998, Foley felt his character had plateaued. He knew he had to do something drastic to revitalize his momentum, something that would cement their legacy rather than detract from it. For the King of the Ring event, producers planned to reignite the feud inside the recently developed Hell in a Cell structure. The concept was born from a desire to escalate the traditional steel cage match. Normally, a competitor won a cage match by escaping over the top or through the door. The new pitch was to put a solid roof on the cage, ensuring no escape. 2 men would enter, and only one would leave. The first ever Hell in a Cell match had taken place months prior between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, setting an unbelievably high standard. Technically speaking, many still consider that inaugural bout to be the greatest of its kind. Foley watched that match in absolute awe, realizing he possessed none of the athletic finesse that Michaels and The Undertaker displayed. Searching for inspiration, Foley consulted his mentor, Terry Funk. During their conversation, Funk jokingly suggested that they should start the match on the actual roof of the cell, and then Foley should be thrown off. It was meant to be dark humor, but when Funk stopped laughing, Foley looked at him with complete seriousness and stated that he believed he could actually survive such a fall. The idea took root in Foley's mind, and he could not shake it. He casually pitched the concept of being thrown off the roof to McMahon and The Undertaker. Undertaker was highly reluctant to hurl his opponent off a massive steel structure. Foley, however, was dead set on the idea, employing his natural persuasive charm to get the executives on board. He did not view this match as the launchpad for a grand second act of his career. Rather, he felt he was desperately trying to keep his head above water. He genuinely believed that once his run with The Undertaker concluded, his career at the top level would be over. Referee Jimmy Corderas, who was on the ring crew at the time, confirmed that Foley had shared his general plans, assuring everyone he would be safe. Foley operated on a distinct philosophy. If he could visualize a stunt in his mind, He believed he could execute it in reality. His peers trusted that eccentric intuition. The atmosphere in the Pittsburgh Civic Arena was electric. Over 16,000 fans packed the building, unaware they were about to witness history. As Mankind made his entrance, the pressure on his shoulders was immense. He had to follow the masterpiece created by Shawn Michaels, all while knowing he lacked the natural agility of a top-tier athlete. Behind the curtain, producers like Gerald Briscoe sat at the monitors, acting as the pilot for the live broadcast. At the commentary desk, Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler were entirely in the dark regarding Foley's extreme blueprint. They were as oblivious as the fans watching at home. Foley wanted to start the match in a way no one had ever witnessed before. As he approached the towering steel structure, rather than entering the door, he began to climb the outer mesh. A wave of shock washed over the audience and the commentators. Everyone assumed the battle was supposed to begin inside the confines of the cage. Yet, there was Mankind scaling to the top, completely defying logic. Despite assuring management that he was comfortable with the stunt, Foley harbored a secret. He was terrified of heights. As he stood on top of the cell, enveloped in the darkness of the arena's upper echelon, The Undertaker's ominous music echoed throughout the building. Foley silently panicked, wondering how he could gracefully climb back down without ruining his professional reputation. But the die was cast. The Undertaker ascended the structure to meet him, and the match officially began nearly 20 feet above the concrete floor. The sheer visual of two massive men fighting on a metal grid suspended in the air created a deep, visceral anxiety. The roof of the cell was fastened with industrial zip ties, completely unequipped to support 600 pounds of battling athletes. With every step they took, the metal mesh buckled beneath their weight. The sound of zip ties snapping echoed loudly. The combatants were literally destroying the structure simply by walking on it. Foley attempted to execute a suplex on the unstable roof, but the Undertaker wisely blocked it, recognizing the imminent danger of the mesh giving way prematurely. The brawl moved dangerously close to the edge of the cell, directly above the Spanish announcer's desk. Backstage, the agents and producers held their breath. No one truly believed Foley would take the plunge. The margin for error was terrifyingly small. Looking down from that height, a standard commentary table looks like a fragile dollhouse. Then the unthinkable happened. The Undertaker grabbed Mankind, hoisted him up, and flung his 300-pound body off the top of the cage. Time seemed to warp. For those watching, the fall felt as though it happened in agonizing slow motion. Yet it was over in the blink of an eye. The sound of the impact was horrifying. Foley crashed through the Spanish announce table with the force of an automobile collision. The arena erupted in a mix of awe and genuine terror. Backstage, the locker room exploded with concern. It was a universally shared thought. They had just watched a man die on live television. In a business known for wild theatrics, no one had ever attempted a stunt of this magnitude. It shattered the boundaries of reality. Jim Ross screamed into his microphone, deeply shaken. Colette Foley, watching at home with their two young children, was paralyzed with fear. She continuously told her children it was fake in a desperate attempt to soothe them, while internally, she was panicking. If The Undertaker had thrown him just a fraction too far, or a fraction too short, Foley would have missed the table entirely, plummeting directly onto the unforgiving concrete or into the crowd of spectators. Miraculously, Foley had visualized the trajectory perfectly. Mid-air, he rotated his body just enough to land flat on the desk, allowing the breaking table to absorb a portion of the fatal impact. At ringside, Spanish commentator Hugo Savinovic had to physically dive out of his chair to avoid being crushed. The situation immediately shifted from an entertainment broadcast to a medical emergency. The unwritten rule of wrestling is that personnel do not interfere with the performance. But the line between script and reality had just been obliterated. Terry Funk rushed to Foley's side, urgently checking for consciousness. Dr. François Petit, the company physician known for his unconventional but effective sports medicine techniques, bolted from his medical room to the scene. The medical team rushed a gurney down the aisle, completely unprepared for an extraction of this nature. They even had to raise the massive cell structure just to fit the gurney into the ringside area. They strapped Foley to the backboard. The match was over. Everyone from the fans to the executives breathed a heavy sigh of relief, assuming the medical evacuation was the conclusion to an undeniably historic, albeit terrifying, spectacle. But Mick Foley is a different breed of human. As the gurney moved up the aisle, a realization washed over Foley. The longer he stayed on television, the more engaged the audience became. With a battered body and a dislocated shoulder, he dramatically rolled off the stretcher. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar. Officials, referees, and his closest friends begged him to stop. They screamed at him to stay down. Instead, Foley turned around, walked back toward the ring, and began to climb the cell once again. It was an act of pure, incomprehensible defiance. While many thought him insane, it was precisely this moment of absolute refusal to quit that cemented him as a legendary star. Backstage, the locker room was packed around the monitors, completely transfixed. Foley and The Undertaker resumed their battle on the compromised roof of the cell. The next planned sequence was supposed to be a relatively safe stunt compared to the massive fall. The idea was for The Undertaker to execute a chokeslam on Foley, which would safely tear the mesh, allowing Foley to be suspended visually before dropping. But the structure gave way entirely. When The Undertaker drove Foley into the fencing, the panel ripped entirely free from its supports. Foley plummeted through the roof, free falling in an uncontrolled descent, and crashed violently into the center of the ring below. The ring mat is essentially a thin layer of padding stretched over solid wood and steel beams. Hitting it from that height is akin to hitting cement. To make matters infinitely worse, a heavy steel folding chair that had been resting on the roof fell directly through the hole with him, striking Foley squarely in the face as he hit the mat. The reaction to this second fall was radically different from the first. There was no awe. There was only chilling silence and absolute dread. Foley lay motionless. Backstage, panic set in. This was an accident. This was unscripted trauma. Producers furiously tried to get executives on the communication headsets, but the lines were frozen in chaos. For the first time in his legendary career, Mick Foley was legitimately knocked out cold. He suffered a severe concussion. The ring quickly filled with medical staff and personnel. Dr. Petit and Terry Funk hovered over his lifeless body. The Undertaker, remaining in character while peering down through the broken roof, quietly instructed Funk to check if Foley was still breathing. Realizing the perilous situation, Terry Funk displayed remarkable veteran instincts. To buy the medical team crucial seconds, Funk turned to The Undertaker and initiated a brief, physical altercation, drawing the camera's focus away from the unconscious Foley. According to modern standards, this match should have been immediately terminated. However, in that era of the industry, officials rarely stopped matches. Instead, they improvised to buy time for the performers to recover. After 42 agonizing seconds of darkness, Foley regained consciousness. The first thing he saw was Terry Funk's shoes. Disoriented and severely concussed, he somehow willed himself to his feet. His face was a mask of tragedy. He had suffered a massive, gaping wound just below his lower lip. Driven by a bizarre, theatrical instinct even in the midst of a severe concussion, Foley pushed his tongue through the hole in his face, creating a macabre, unforgettable visual for the television cameras. Adding to the grotesque imagery, a missing tooth was visibly lodged inside Foley's nostril. Medical professionals later deduced that the steel chair had knocked the tooth down his throat, and due to his heavy, labored breathing, he had literally snorted his own tooth back up into his nasal passage. The reality of the pain anchored the drama. The concern in the eyes of the officials was not a performance. Foley was operating entirely on autopilot. In his concussed state, The only thought his brain could process was the final, scripted sequence of the match, the thumbtacks. Despite being visibly compromised, Foley insisted on finishing the story. Thousands of silver thumbtacks were spilled across the canvas. In a final act of masochistic dedication, Foley took several violent impacts directly onto the bed of tacks, intentionally rolling around to ensure as many as possible embedded themselves in his flesh. Because adrenaline had completely overridden his central nervous system, he did not even register the immediate pain of the metal piercing his skin. He had become the pain. Finally, after 17 grueling minutes, the match reached its conclusion with The Undertaker securing the victory. The Pittsburgh crowd of 16,000 stood in collective shock. No one had ever witnessed such a raw display of sacrifice. The medical team brought the stretcher out once again, but in true hardcore legend fashion. Foley waved it off. He walked out of the arena on his own 2 feet, aided by officials, as the crowd went absolutely insane. This unwavering commitment solidified a bond between Foley and the audience that could never be broken. He understood that by risking his own physical well-being, he allowed the fans to completely invest their belief in him. But every action has a consequence, and the fallout was immediate. Colette Foley, furious and traumatized, waited hours for a phone call that usually came immediately after a show. When Mick finally called, she screamed at him, revealing that their young children believed they had just watched their father perish on television. The trust Colette had in Mick to protect himself was deeply fractured. Behind the curtain, the mood was somber. Vince McMahon approached Foley while a doctor was actively plucking thumbtacks from his back. McMahon thanked Foley for his incredible sacrifice, but demanded a stern promise. Foley was never to do anything like that again. The Undertaker checked on his friend, deeply concerned for his actual well-being. The physical toll was extensive. Foley required 15 stitches to close the wound beneath his lip. He lost multiple teeth. He suffered a dislocated jaw and a dislocated shoulder. His kidneys were severely bruised, causing him pain for 6 long weeks. Surprisingly, the medical staff of that era barely treated him for the massive concussion he sustained. Yet, professionally, the gamble paid off in unimaginable ways. The match sparked a career renaissance for Foley. He transitioned from being a performer the chairman did not even want to look at, to capturing the World Wrestling Federation Championship a mere 6 months later. However, the bar for extreme spectacle had been raised to an impossible height. Foley felt immense pressure to consistently live up to his moniker as the hardcore legend. He felt a profound sense of debt to the audience and to his opponents. Just 7 months after the events in the cell, Foley pushed his limits again, this time against The Rock in the infamous I Quit match. Despite Jim Ross advising against the violent nature of the bout, Foley insisted on proceeding. The match escalated into a horrifying display of brutality. The Rock, armed with a steel chair, delivered repeated, unprotected strikes to Foley's head. The original plan called for 5 chair shots, but in the heat of the moment, Foley absorbed a staggering 11 crushing blows to the skull. The footage remains sickening to watch. His young children were in the front row, crying uncontrollably as they watched their father being beaten to a pulp. The fiction of the storyline had bled dangerously into reality. Foley was suffering legitimate brain trauma for the sake of a television angle. Years later, his daughter Noelle confessed that she has blocked out nearly all memories of her father wrestling, attributing the memory loss to severe childhood trauma. Medical professionals recognized that 11 unprotected chair shots could easily be fatal for an average person. The I Quit match is a stark reminder of Foley's dangerous compulsion to overdeliver. Regardless of the personal cost, Foley understood his style would result in chronic discomfort, often choosing to make a move more painful just so it would look more authentic on screen. Even when multiple doctors urged him to retire, warning him of impending paralysis, Foley refused to stop. He suffered concussion upon concussion, pushing through the fog, sometimes driving his car, and completely forgetting where he lived. When a company neurologist refused to clear him for competition, explicitly stating he should never wrestle again, Foley finally had to face the reality of his condition. Today, the medical community understands the devastating long-term effects of repetitive brain trauma, specifically chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Every single bump in a wrestling ring equates to a low-speed car crash. The cumulative effect of Foley's career is an immense daily physical burden. His family lives in constant anxiety regarding how his neurological health will deteriorate over the next 10 or 20 years. Foley himself admits that he cannot see a way out of the physical debt he has accrued. Yet, he fights the cognitive decline by participating in spoken word shows, using the theatrical storytelling as mental gymnastics to keep his mind sharp. He requires the stimulation of a live audience. He needs that connection to keep going. When reflecting on his career, Foley is remarkably self-aware. He acknowledges that he engaged in a wild, fantasy form of combat to earn the acceptance of total strangers. He desperately wanted to be loved, and he sacrificed his physical vessel to hear the roar of the crowd. It is impossible to criticize that pathological need without also acknowledging that it is the exact engine that drove his massive success. For a long time, Foley harbored deep resentment toward Hell in a Cell. He felt trapped by its shadow, frustrated that it was the singular moment he was famous for. He spiraled into a dark place, feeling that despite all his efforts, he had accomplished nothing else of value. It was a conversation with The Undertaker that eventually provided closure. The Undertaker reminded him that what they created that night in Pittsburgh would outlive them both. It was a piece of performance art that transcended the sport. In a poignant moment captured years later, Foley and his daughter visited a company warehouse and unexpectedly stumbled upon the original cell structure. The man who had seemingly felt no pain in the ring placed his hand on the rusted steel mesh and began to weep. It was a profound release of emotion, a recognition of how incredibly close he came to losing his life, and an acknowledgement of the terrifying gravity of his choices. Was the glory worth the permanent damage? Foley himself admits there is no reward big enough to justify that specific level of risk. While medical knowledge regarding head injuries was archaic at the time, he remains unsure if he would have altered his path even if he had known the consequences. The wrestling ring offered him a canvas to create surreal, sublime art. Despite the heavy physical toll, there were nights when the magic of the performance provided him with the most powerful feeling in the world. The story of Hell in a Cell is not merely a tale of a wrestling match. According to the documents and the accounts of those who survived it, it is a complex psychological study of a man who traded his physical well-being for immortality. It is a testament to human endurance, a critique of an industry's insatiable appetite for spectacle, and a raw, unflinching look at the ultimate price of fame. The echoes of that night continue to resonate, challenging us to look beyond the entertainment and acknowledge the very real human sacrifice left behind in the squared circle. Good night, and thank you for joining us on this journey into the dark side of the ring. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Step into the shadows of the squared circle with me. Over the decades, we have witnessed the evolution of professional wrestling. We have seen triumphs, we have seen tragedies, and we have seen moments that forever altered the landscape of sports entertainment. But there are certain nights that transcend the scripted drama of the ring. Nights where the illusion shatters, and the grim reality of human endurance takes center stage. Tonight, we delve into a chapter of professional wrestling that hits you like a mallet to the consciousness. It is a story of a dangerously crazy masterpiece. A match that persists in the collective memory of fans as both an epic success and a chilling conscionalità. We are going back to June 28, 1998, the World Wrestling Federation's King of the Ring event. The match that would earn its place as one of the most shocking in the history of the industry. The Undertaker versus Mankind. The structure known as Hell in a Cell To truly understand what transpired in that steel structure, we must first understand the man behind the mask. Everyone who steps into the chaotic world of professional wrestling is looking for something they find missing in their own lives. For Mick Foley, the man who breathed life into the Mankind persona, that missing element was acceptance. According to his own reflections, Foley was a young man who faced relentless teasing. He harbored an overwhelming, deeply rooted need to be liked. He desperately wanted to hold the championship belt, to hear the roar of the crowd, and to feel validated by total strangers. The lengths to which he would go for a reaction were evident long before he ever signed a major television contract. As a college sophomore, Foley orchestrated a spectacle in his dormitory that foreshadowed his entire career. He filled his mouth with red food coloring and launched himself off a bed, performing a spectacular leap onto a stuffed animal resting on a hard concrete floor. Upon impact, he spit the blood-red concoction from his mouth. A female student watching the stunt screamed that it was the most disgusting thing she had ever seen. In that fleeting moment, Mick Foley felt an undeniable surge of power. A realization washed over him. If he could not make people love him, perhaps he could disgust them. He simply needed a reaction. He needed to be noticed. This unyielding drive birthed the hardcore legend. But a normal Mick Foley match was never truly normal. It was a brutal display of physical sacrifice. Blood, thumbtacks, fire, barbed wire. Whether he was being detonated by explosives in Japanese death matches, being speared through a flaming table, or taking excruciating falls directly onto exposed concrete, Foley put his body through unimaginable torment. He chased the visceral reactions of the audience. He sought the gasps, the shock, the sheer horror of the crowd. Realism was his greatest tool. In his mind, a match was only successful if he struggled to walk back to his hotel room afterward. He did not necessarily enjoy the pain, but he possessed a masterful ability to absorb it and project it into a compelling, albeit terrifying, narrative. Yet, behind the violence, there was a profoundly gentle soul. Colette Foley, his wife of over 35 years, saw beyond the scars and the chaos. When they first met, she was captivated by his kind eyes, his gentle nature, and his endearingly terrible humor. Their wedding song was appropriately titled Beauty and the Beast. Colette understood his commitment to the business. She recognized that when the adrenaline pumped through his veins, his sole desire was to send the audience home talking about the greatness of the show, even at extreme personal risk. That risk manifested in his various personas. Cactus Jack was a wild, unpredictable entity who commanded attention through sheer charisma and an aura of genuine instability. Jim Cornette, a legendary manager and producer for the company at the time, recognized Foley's brilliant grasp of ring psychology. Foley understood that the audience craved chaos. He knew how to take the fans on an emotional roller coaster, eliciting the exact responses he desired, thereby expanding his reputation across the globe. To hone his craft, Foley immersed himself in the gritty realism of Japanese professional wrestling. In a bedroom furnished with nothing but a mattress on the floor and a black and white television with a faulty video cassette recorder, he would consume up to 12 hours of Japanese wrestling tapes a day. He was drawn to the storytelling, the concept of man battling not just his opponent, but his physical surroundings. Japan seemed like his ultimate destination, especially when they needed a rugged foreigner to feud with the legendary Terry Funk. Funk, renowned for his ability to make fans suspend their disbelief instantly, became a mentor to Foley. Together, they engaged in explosive, bloody deathmatches that set Foley apart from the rest of the industry. He was drawn to the extreme, finding validation in the pain, believing that his willingness to endure torture was proof of his special talent. Because of this brutal style, Mick Foley never envisioned himself as a star in the World Wrestling Federation. At that time, the company was heavily sanitized, operating in a very family-friendly, highly regulated era. Foley's violent art form did not align with the polished product they were selling. Vince McMahon, the chairman of the company, actively resisted signing Foley. McMahon did not find Foley marketable or physically attractive enough for his television programs. It took the relentless advocacy of Jim Ross, who served as vice president of talent relations, to convince McMahon to take a chance. Ross saw a rare, intangible quality in Foley. Furthermore, Ross needed compelling challengers for the company's biggest star, The Undertaker. McMahon was consistently booking gigantic, slow-moving opponents against The Undertaker, resulting in dull, uninspired contests. What The Undertaker truly needed was an unpredictable lunatic. According to backstage accounts, McMahon eventually relented, slamming his hand on a table and agreeing to hire Foley under one strict condition. He demanded that Foley's face be completely covered. McMahon wanted the character to be a mysterious nobody, a reflection of his own initial perception of the man. Gerald Briscoe, a legendary producer, recalled the monumental challenge of building a character out of thin air. Thus, Mankind was born, a tortured, masked soul who tore out his own hair and lived in boiler rooms. It was a bizarre, potentially disastrous concept that would have failed with anyone else. But Mick Foley's absolute commitment to the role breathed life into the character. He understood that without a genuine connection to the audience, the gimmick was meaningless. Foley achieved his goal. He became a phenomenal dancing partner for The Undertaker. Across 7 pay-per-view events and 10 television matches, they built a historic rivalry, traveling the globe and punishing each other in the ring. But as time wore on, the Mankind character began to plateau. Foley recognized the stagnation and knew he needed to inject new life into his career and his legendary feud. He did not want to detract from their shared history. He wanted to elevate it. The producers devised a plan for the 1998 King of the Ring event. They would reignite the rivalry using a newly established, monstrous structure, the Hell in a Cell. Traditional steel cage matches allowed competitors to win by escaping over the top or through a door. But Hell in a Cell was different. It was a massive steel enclosure with a roof. 2 men enter, and only one walks out. The Undertaker had inaugurated this structure in a critically acclaimed masterpiece of a match against Shawn Michaels some 9 months prior. Foley watched that inaugural match with his jaw open, recognizing that he lacked the athletic prowess to replicate the high-flying maneuvers performed by Michaels and The Undertaker. Seeking guidance, Foley turned to his mentor, Terry Funk. In a casual conversation, Funk jokingly suggested that they start the match on top of the cage, and that Foley should allow himself to be thrown off. It was a darkly humorous comment, but the laughter stopped when Foley looked at Funk and stated that he believed he could actually do it. The seed was planted. Foley pitched the terrifying concept to both Vince McMahon and The Undertaker. The Undertaker was extremely hesitant, not wanting to be responsible for throwing a human being off a structure of that height. However, Foley's unwavering determination eventually convinced them. Foley viewed this extreme stunt not as the launch of a new era in his career, but as a desperate measure to keep his head above water. He fully believed that once this run was over, his career would end with it. The anticipation in the Pittsburgh Civic Arena on that fateful June night was palpable. 16,000 fans packed the venue. The pressure resting on Foley's shoulders was immense. He was stepping into the shadow of a classic match, knowing he possessed limited athletic agility, yet armed with a plan that bordered on suicidal. Backstage, producers like Gerald Briscoe sat before banks of monitors, acting as the pilots of the broadcast, completely unaware of the sheer magnitude of what was about to unfold. Even the legendary broadcast team of Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler were kept in the dark, watching the events unfold with the same bewilderment as the fans at home. As the ominous structure lowered, Mick Foley did the unthinkable. He bypassed the entrance door and began to scale the outside of the cage. A wave of shock washed over the arena. He was supposed to start inside. Yet, Foley continued his ascent, eventually standing upon the mesh roof, nearly 20 feet above the concrete floor. He had assured management that he was comfortable with the height, but in reality, he was terrified. As the Undertaker made his imposing entrance and joined Foley on the roof, the structural integrity of the cell immediately came into question. The roof panels were secured merely by plastic zip ties. With 600 pounds of human weight shifting above, the mesh began to sag precariously. Zip ties snapped like gunfire under the immense pressure. Every step carried the threat of the cage completely collapsing. Foley attempted to execute a maneuver on the sagging roof, but the Undertaker, sensing the imminent danger of the mesh giving way entirely, quickly shut it down. The brawl migrated toward the edge of the cell, directly above the broadcast tables. For those watching, the tension was suffocating. The margin for error was microscopic. If Foley were thrown too far, or not far enough, he would plummet directly onto the unforgiving concrete or into the crowd. Then, time seemed to stand still. With a brutal heave, the Undertaker launched a 300-pound human being off the top of the hell in a cell. Foley fell freely through the air, crashing violently through the Spanish broadcast table below. The sound of the impact was horrifying. It sounded like a severe automobile collision. Backstage, the locker room erupted in sheer panic. Men who had spent their entire lives in a business of scripted violence thought they had just witnessed a man lose his life on live television. The arena fell into a stunned, breathless silence. Colette Foley, watching at home with their 2 young children, frantically tried to soothe them, claiming it was all acting, while her own mind spiraled into absolute terror. Foley lay motionless in the wreckage of the table. He had envisioned the fall in his head, twisting his body in mid-air to land as flat as possible, using the table to cushion the impact. It was a miracle of physics and raw luck that he survived the initial descent. Officials, referees, and medical personnel flooded the ringside area. Terry Funk was the first to reach him, desperately checking for consciousness. Dr. Francois Petit, the company physician known for his aggressive treatments, rushed to the scene. Foley had landed terribly on his back and suffered a severely dislocated shoulder. Emergency medical technicians brought out a stretcher. The entire presentation shifted from a wrestling match to a frantic rescue operation. They strapped Foley to the board. The fans, the broadcasters, the management, everyone believed the match was completely over. It had to be. But as they wheeled him up the aisle, something unfathomable happened. Foley, battered, broken, and functioning entirely on raw adrenaline, forced his way off the stretcher. He refused to let the match end. Against the desperate pleas of everyone around him, Foley turned back toward the ring. He began to climb the cell once again. It was a moment that defied human logic. The man was a physical wreck, yet he was ascending the steel structure for a second time. This singular act of defiance cemented his legacy. It transformed him from a wrestler into an absolute icon of resilience. But the nightmare was far from over. Once back on top of the cage, the planned storyline was supposed to be much safer. The original idea was for a chokeslam to cause the mesh to slowly give way, allowing The Undertaker to push Foley down safely. But the fragile zip ties had already sustained too much damage. When The Undertaker hoisted Foley into the air and drove him down, the cage panel gave way entirely. Foley plummeted through the roof, falling freely into the ring and crashing onto the solid mat below. The ring mat offers virtually no cushion. It is akin to hitting solid cement. Compounding the catastrophic fall, a heavy steel folding chair that had been resting on the roof fell directly behind him, striking him violently in the face as he hit the mat. This fall was entirely unplanned. It was not a choreographed stunt. It was a devastating accident. Backstage, the panic evolved into absolute dread. People desperately tried to reach Vince McMahon on the telephones. Colette Foley watched in horror as her husband lay, completely lifeless on the broadcast. For the first time in his career, Mick Foley was legitimately knocked unconscious. The ring filled with personnel once again. Foley was completely unresponsive. The Undertaker, peering down through the broken roof, later stated he genuinely thought he was looking at a dead man. Terry Funk instructed The Undertaker to attack him, creating a distraction to buy time for the medical staff to assess Foley's condition. In any other sport, in any other era, the match would have been immediately terminated. But in that specific time and place, they did not stop matches. They bought time. Foley remained unconscious for 42 agonizing seconds. When he finally opened his eyes, his vision was filled by Terry Funk's shoes. Slowly, miraculously, the clouds in his mind began to part, and he realized he was still in the middle of a match. With a massive, bleeding wound under his lip, Foley's performer instincts kicked in. In a grotesque display of showmanship, he pushed his tongue through the open wound in his face and smiled for the cameras. The sheer violence of the chair shot had knocked 2 of his teeth out. One of those teeth had been driven down his throat, only to be forcefully blown upwards through his nasal cavity due to his heavy breathing, lodging itself visibly in his nostril. He was a battered, bloodied mess, his eyes vacant, operating on pure instinct. Yet, he demanded the match continue. He even requested that thumbtacks be introduced into the ring, purposely rolling his bare, wounded body through thousands of sharp tacks to ensure the audience received the spectacle they paid for. Finally, after 17 minutes of relentless, unimaginable punishment, The Undertaker secured the victory. As Foley was helped to the back, refusing the stretcher once more, the crowd roared in sheer awe. They recognized the horrific reality of what they had witnessed. They had given Foley the acceptance he had chased his entire life. The aftermath was grim. Colette Foley, waiting agonizingly by the telephone, was furious when Mick finally called, screaming that their children believe he was dead. Vince McMahon, while expressing deep gratitude for Foley's massive contribution to the company, issued a stern, unequivocal warning. He demanded that Foley promise never to do anything like that again. Foley was severely injured. He required 15 stitches beneath his lip, his jaw was dislocated, his shoulder was out of its socket, he suffered a bruised kidney that plagued him for 6 weeks, and he endured severe, untreated concussions. Yet, the match acted as a massive catalyst. 6 months later, Foley captured the World Championship. The roar of the crowd, the massive reactions, fueled his desire to continually raise the bar. The Hell in a Cell match became a standard that he felt obligated to surpass, leading him down a dangerous path of escalating violence. Just 7 months later, the consequences of this escalating brutality were fully displayed in an infamous I Quit match against The Rock. Ignoring the warnings, Foley absorbed horrific punishment. The match called for Foley to be handcuffed while his opponent struck him with a steel chair. They had initially agreed upon 5 strikes. However, caught in the heat of the moment and his own unyielding desire to overdeliver, Foley absorbed 11 unprotected chair shots to the head. The scene was sickening. It was an exhibition of sheer brutality that caused legitimate brain damage for the sake of television ratings. For his daughter Noelle, the memory of that match is a source of profound trauma. The realization that 11 steel chair shots could have easily killed an average person is a sobering reminder of the horrific physical toll of the industry. The collateral damage of Foley's career is a harsh reality. Medical professionals explicitly warned him to stop, predicting that continuing would leave him crippled. He suffered concussion after concussion. There were days he would drive his car and forget where he lived. Independent neurologists explicitly advised him never to step into a ring again. Today, the shadow of chronic traumatic encephalopathy looms heavily over the Foley family. The long-term effects of repetitive brain trauma are terrifying. They face the daily anxiety of not knowing how his cognitive functions will deteriorate 10 or 20 years down the line. For years, Foley harbored resentment toward the Hell in a Cell match, feeling that his entire multifaceted career had been entirely eclipsed by a single night of extreme violence. He felt as though he had accomplished nothing else of value. But time offers perspective. A conversation with The Undertaker helped him realize that what they created that night was a piece, a performance art that would outlive them both. During a visit to the company's archival warehouse, Foley unexpectedly encountered the original steel cell. In a rare display of raw emotion, he touched the rusted metal and began to cry. It was a profound realization of his own mortality. He stood before the very structure that almost claimed his life, deeply grateful that he was simply still here. Mick Foley traded his physical well-being for the roar of the crowd. He secured his legacy as one of the most beloved and respected figures in the history of sports entertainment. But as we close the book on this dangerously crazy masterpiece, a lingering, haunting question remains echoing in the steel. Considering the pain, the memory loss, and the permanent scars left on both the man and his family, was it truly worth it? Step into the shadows of professional wrestling history, where the line between scripted entertainment and harsh, unforgiving reality is not just blurred, but completely shattered. Professional wrestling is an industry built on the suspension of disbelief, a world where modern gladiators perform acts of incredible athleticism while safeguarding their opponents. But there are moments when the script falls away. There are moments when the illusion dies, leaving only raw, visceral danger. On June 28, 1998, at the World Wrestling Federation's King of the Ring pay-per-view event, the world witnessed one of those very moments. It was a match that would instantly earn its place as one of the most shocking, terrifying, and defining spectacles in the history of sports entertainment. The Undertaker versus Mankind. The structure. Hell in a Cell. When you hear the words Hell in a Cell, they hit you like a mallet to the consciousness. Going into that night, those within the industry knew it was going to be an intense spectacle, but absolutely no one could have anticipated the sheer madness that was about to unfold. Inside that steel structure were two incredibly unique talents, performers who possessed a dangerous affinity for pushing the envelope until it teetered over the absolute edge of sanity. Professional wrestling is a performance, but as the old saying goes, you cannot fake gravity. Many veterans of the squared circle have seen frightening things throughout their careers, but the events of that night struck a chord of pure, unadulterated terror that remains unmatched. What left fans completely stunned, completely paralyzed in their seats, was the unrelenting, barbaric punishment that Mick Foley, the man behind the Mankind mask, willingly endured. Until you watched it unfold before your very eyes, you simply would not believe that a human being could physically subject themselves to such devastation and live to tell the tale. This match was real. The agonizing pain was real. The heart-stopping drama was real. Behind the curtain, seasoned professionals and hardened veterans were cursing, screaming, and questioning Foley's sanity, calling him a fool for risking his life. Why are you doing this? It is the question that haunts the legacy of what is now considered one of wrestling's most infamous encounters. The legacy of this Hell in a Cell match persists as a haunting paradox. It was an epic, career-defining success, but equally a grim cautionary tale. According to those watching backstage, the industry dodged multiple bullets that fateful night. Looking back, it is profoundly crazy to comprehend the reality of the situation. To think that a major promotion would allow a competitor to be knocked completely unconscious, only to wake up and simply continue the match, is a jarring reflection of a different era. The collateral damage that ensued from that night and the years that followed is another story entirely. It forces us to ask the hard questions. When does it stop? When is it finally enough? In this business, you pay all day long for the decisions you make during your 15 minutes in the spotlight. It was a dangerously crazy masterpiece, but everyone who watches it, and everyone who participated in it, needs to ask themselves a very difficult question. Was the sacrifice truly worth it? To understand the madness of that night, we have to understand the mind of the man who orchestrated his own destruction. Everyone who gets into professional wrestling is looking for something that they find missing in their own personal lives. For Mick Foley, the journey began with an overwhelming, desperate need to be liked. Growing up, he was heavily teased, leaving a void that he sought to fill with the adoration of the masses and the prestige of the World Wrestling Federation Championship belt. This psychological foundation was laid long before he ever stepped foot in a professional ring. According to Foley's own recollections, there is a telling story from his sophomore year in college. Seeking attention and a reaction from his peers, he took a swig of red food coloring and performed a spectacular leap off a bed, crashing onto a stuffed animal resting on a solid concrete floor. Upon impact, he spat the blood-like concoction out of his mouth. The entire dorm was watching. When one of the female students yelled out that it was the most disgusting thing she had ever seen, something clicked inside the mind of the young man. He felt an undeniable sense of power. It was in that moment he realized a fundamental truth about his future career. If he could not make people love him, perhaps he could make them completely disgusted by him. He just needed to get reactions. This pursuit of extreme reactions birthed the hardcore legend. But for new fans discovering his legacy, the 1998 Hell in a Cell match often serves as a deceptive gateway. Many modern viewers cite it as the first match they were ever shown, the spectacle that made them huge fans. However, they are often surprised to learn that not all wrestling matches, or even all Mick Foley matches, are quite like that. A standard Mick Foley match was indeed inherently brutal, often featuring blood, thumbtacks, and fire. He built his reputation in places like Japan, getting exploded by C4 explosives, diving into unforgiving barbed wire, and taking horrifying bumps on exposed concrete. He put his body through an unimaginable amount of trauma, constantly searching for that visceral, shocked reaction from the crowd. Those who know him best paint a picture of a man driven by the roar of the audience. His daughter, Noelle Foley, has noted that he deeply loved eliciting groans of disgust and shock from the crowd. Realism was his greatest tool. In his own mind, Foley did not believe he was having a successful match unless he had physical trouble simply walking back to his hotel room. It was not that he enjoyed the pain itself. Rather, he found joy in his ability to absorb that punishment and present it to the audience in a way that was wildly entertaining. But behind the blood and the broken bones was a starkly different man. His wife, Colette Foley, who has known him for over 35 years, recalls their early days with incredible fondness. When she first met Mick, she did not see a monster. She saw a gentle, kind person with warm eyes. It was his corny jokes and terrible sense of humor that won her heart. A stark contrast to the violence he perpetrated in the ring. Their wedding song was Beauty and the Beast, a fitting metaphor for a man who lived two completely separate lives. They were a strong team, and Colette fully understood his unwavering commitment to his craft. When the adrenaline was pumping, Foley's singular focus was ensuring the fans left the arena talking about how incredible the show was, completely disregarding his own physical well-being. This drive to escalate the danger led to the creation of his alter ego, Cactus Jack. Cactus Jack was a wild, unpredictable entity, a man who seemed genuinely insane. He possessed a bizarre, captivating charisma that made it impossible to look away. According to Jim Cornette, a producer for the World Wrestling Federation at the time, Foley was a master of ring psychology. He understood that the audience craved unpredictability. They loved seeing someone who appeared to be operating completely outside the script, a madman biting his opponents and breaking the rules. Foley knew exactly how to take the crowd on an emotional roller coaster, manipulating their reactions perfectly to build his growing reputation. His dedication to the craft of violence was total. In his early days, his bedroom furniture consisted of nothing more than a mattress on the floor and a small, black and white television with a faulty video cassette recorder. On that machine, he would consume up to 12 hours of Japanese wrestling tapes a day. He was captivated by the realism and the intense storytelling of the Japanese death matches, where a wrestler had to defeat not only their opponent, but the hazardous environment itself. For a time, Foley genuinely believed Japan would be his permanent wrestling home. The Japanese promoters were looking for a tough foreigner to feud with the legendary Terry Funk. Funk, renowned for his unparalleled ability to make fans suspend their disbelief, became a mentor to Foley. Together, they engaged in explosive, fiery, and incredibly bloody death matches across Japan. Foley was naturally drawn to the wild, dangerous style, often leaving the ring on his hands and knees, taking his agony as undeniable proof that he had created something truly special. Because of this extreme style, Foley never saw himself fitting into the pristine, corporate mold of the World Wrestling Federation. During that era, the company was heavily geared toward family-friendly, G-rated entertainment. It was a clean, somewhat bland presentation, and a gritty, violent brawler like Foley simply did not fit the corporate image. His travel partner and close friend, Al Snow, recalled that Vince McMahon, the chairman of the company, absolutely did not want Mick Foley. McMahon believed Foley was unmarketable and unattractive for television. It was Jim Ross, the vice president of talent relations, who championed Foley's cause. Ross pleaded with McMahon to trust his eye for talent, insisting that there was something undeniably special about the rugged brawler. The company desperately needed compelling opponents for their cornerstone star, The Undertaker. For too long, McMahon had relied on matching The Undertaker against giant, lumbering opponents, resulting in matches that were slow and dull. Ross argued that what The Undertaker truly needed was not another giant, but a complete lunatic. Legend has it that McMahon finally slammed his hand down on a desk and agreed to hire Foley. But with one massive caveat, they had to cover his face. McMahon was convinced that nobody knew who Foley was and that he was essentially a nobody. Gerald Briscoe, a Hall of Famer and trusted producer, recalled the monumental challenge the creative team faced. They were tasked with building a captivating character entirely from scratch, out of what management considered to be nothing. This directive birthed Mankind, a deranged, masked psychotic who lived in boiler rooms and pulled his own hair out. It was a bizarre, almost unbelievable concept, and industry insiders agree that it would have been a catastrophic failure with absolutely anyone else under the mask. But Foley made it work. Without a genuine connection to the audience, a character is meaningless. Foley understood this, and the fans could sense his absolute, terrifying commitment to the role. Foley's primary objective was to become the perfect adversary for The Undertaker. He was willing to try absolutely anything to succeed, famously described by colleagues as a man who would turn down nothing but the bed covers. This unmatched dedication presented a terrifying new challenge for the agents and producers: how to utilize Foley's brilliance without letting him literally kill himself in the ring. By the summer of 1998, Foley and The Undertaker had built an incredible foundation. They had battled across the globe, main eventing 7 pay-per-view events and countless television broadcasts. However, Foley felt his character had reached a plateau. He believed he needed to do something drastic, something monumental that would cement their legacy forever rather than letting it fade. The stage was set for the King of the Ring event. The producers decided to reignite the feud utilizing a recently developed, horrific concept: Hell in a Cell. Traditional cage matches in the company usually ended when a wrestler climbed over the top or escaped through the door. The Hell in a Cell concept was born when the creative minds decided to put a steel roof on the cage, creating an inescapable demonic structure where 2 men enter and only one leaves. The first ever Hell in a Cell match had taken place between The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, setting an unbelievably high standard. It was a technical masterpiece, a mile marker for the industry that Foley watched with his jaw wide open, knowing full well he could not replicate the athletic feats performed by those two men. 9 months later, he was scheduled to step into that same demonic structure with The Undertaker. Seeking advice, Foley turned to his mentor, Terry Funk. When asked what they should do to make the match special, Funk jokingly suggested that they should start the match on top of the cage and that Foley should be thrown off. It was meant as a dark piece of humor between two hardcore veterans. But as Funk stopped laughing, Foley looked at him with absolute seriousness and stated that he believed he could actually do it. The seed was planted, and Foley could not get the terrifying idea out of his head. He casually pitched the concept of being thrown off the roof of the cage to both The Undertaker and Vince McMahon. It was an incredible sales job. The Undertaker was initially deeply opposed to the idea of hurling his opponent off a steel structure, but Foley was completely dead set on the stunt. Eventually, through sheer persistence, he got everyone on board. For Foley, this match was not viewed as the dawn of a new era in his career. It was an act of pure desperation to keep his head above water. He genuinely believed that once this run with The Undertaker was finished, his career in the major leagues would be over. The Undertaker trusted Foley's vision, operating under the assumption that if Foley could visualize the stunt, he could successfully execute it. The tension in the Pittsburgh Civic Arena on that June evening was suffocating. The commentators, Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler, hyped the unprecedented danger of the bout, warning the audience that the loser might bypass the hospital and go straight to the morgue. As Foley walked down the aisle, the psychological pressure must have been immense. He had to follow the legendary Michaels vs. Undertaker match, armed with a body that was far from nimble or athletic. Backstage, a crowd of wrestlers, agents, and crew members gathered around the monitors. Jimmy Corderas, a referee and ring crew member, watched anxiously. Gerald Briscoe sat at the main production console, commanding the broadcast like a pilot in a cockpit. No one in the arena, not the fans, not the commentators, and not even most of the locker room, had any idea what was truly about to happen. Jim Ross, calling the action at ringside, was completely in the dark. Foley's master plan was to start the match in a way no one had ever attempted. As he bypassed the cage door and began to scale the steel mesh wall, a wave of shock washed over the arena. Fans and commentators alike were deeply confused, wondering why he was going up instead of stepping inside. It seemed completely illogical, the act of a man in desperate need of psychological therapy. Despite his bold assurances to McMahon and The Undertaker that he was comfortable on top of the structure, Foley was harboring a secret terror. He was genuinely afraid of heights. Standing nearly 20 feet above the concrete floor, surrounded by the blinding arena lights, he realized the magnitude of his decision. As The Undertaker made his long, ominous entrance, Foley stood on the roof, desperately trying to figure out how he could gracefully climb back down without ruining his professional reputation. But there was no turning back. The match officially began on the roof of the cell. The sheer psychological terror of the environment took hold of everyone watching. Almost immediately, an unforeseen and terrifying structural failure occurred. The top section of the cage was held together by heavy-duty plastic zip ties, with nearly 600 pounds of human weight shifting across the steel mesh. The panels began to sag drastically. With every step, the fencing bowed downward by a foot. The sickening sound of zip ties snapping echoed through the arena like gunfire. Realizing the roof was compromised, Foley attempted to execute a suplex on The Undertaker. Recognizing the imminent danger that the panel would completely give way and send them both plummeting unscripted to the ring below, The Undertaker swiftly cut off the maneuver. The two heavyweights resorted to throwing heavy punches, slowly migrating toward the edge of the cage, directly above the broadcast announce tables. From the vantage point of the commentators, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Jim Ross watched them inch closer to the precipice, initially believing there was absolutely no way Foley would take a fall from that height. The margin for error was impossibly small. From the top of the cage, The announce desk looked like a tiny piece of dollhouse furniture. And then, time seemed to stop. With a terrifying suddenness, a 300-pound human being was hurled from the roof, plummeting through the air from almost 20 feet above the concrete. To those watching, it felt as though the world had shifted into slow motion. Yet the impact occurred in the blink of an eye. The sickening crash of human bone and flesh obliterating the broadcast table sent a shockwave of absolute horror through the arena. Backstage, the locker room erupted in sheer